Hello everyone and welcome to another evening of Heroes Lounge. Or is it another evening? Not quite. That's normally how I open my stream when I get to cast some matches, but instead tonight you're not gonna be seeing two teams duking it out to the death. You will not see me grief the name of various abilities and heroics. Instead, you're gonna see something different. Well, to my left, maybe it's the opposite for you guys at home, is a very handsome and wise young man. Most of you know him as CavalierGuest, and he will be joining me tonight as my co-host for this hopefully long-lasting show. Cav, we've been wanting to do this thing for quite some time now, and admittedly, as all sloths do, we took our time, and you know what? Eventually, we have reached this point where it has actually happened, and I'm very excited about this. How are you this fine evening?
I'm doing really well. You're not kidding about that sloth comment. We started planning this quite a while ago, and stuff kept interfering. It's supposed to be happening last Friday, but then we realized, oh, HGC's happening. Maybe people wouldn't want to watch during that. But it is finally going to happen. Experience is really important in Heroes of the Storm. You could make a strong argument that pretty much every strategy ever devised in Heroes of the Storm is just different ways of manipulating the XP economy of individual maps. So understanding all the different mechanics and how they work and is the first step to developing those strategies and understanding some of the larger things that go on in the context of the game.
Yeah, and you kind of spoiled it, but the first topic of this educational show is going to be experience. For a while
it's at the top. It literally says experience.
Oh, it is. It does. Yeah. Okay, but
I spoiled it.
Okay,
right.
I fixed it. All right. I was actually debating with myself for quite some time. What am I gonna do for the first episode? And I was thinking about something that's gonna be very basic but very, very important. And I couldn't find anything more basic and more important than experience. It felt to me like this is one of those things in the game that is very important, but for the most part misunderstood. Now, I'm not talking about in general. People know what experience is, right? Experience is the process of accumulating points. You accumulate enough points, you level up. You level up enough times, you get access to new talent tiers, and those talent represent power spikes. I think most of us know this, but what most of us don't know is actually all those small nooks and crannies in experience, exactly how you get experience. What are the certain rules, the amount of experience you actually get per level, and how it all integrates with one another. Experience for mercs, for monsters, bosses, objectives. Obviously we all know about minions. So it felt like it's a very important topic that should be covered in the first show of this episode, and I'm kind of glad we're doing this and gonna be talking about experience.
Yeah, so it should be a good time.
Yeah, it should be a good time. So what actually is experience in Heroes of the Storm consists of? Where do you get experience from? So there are several places where you can actually get experience from, and let me try and show this for you guys. You'll need to excuse the production quality, but let me see if I can kind of show it. And there we go. You can see now here on the screen, actually in game, you can all see where you get experience from. If you just mouse over the versus icon at the middle top of the screen, you will have this small window open up, and that window will tell you exactly where you're getting experience from. On the right side in red, of course, it's going to be one team, and on the other side in blue, it's going to be the other. And you can see the sources that XP is gained from. You have heroes, mercs, minions, passive, and structures, and of course at the end total that you can see exactly how much you accumulated. And this is something that a lot of players are either not aware of or are not using in game to determine or see why are they ahead or why they're so behind.
And there's lots of subtle things you can do with it too. If an opponent is like soaking, if you see their experience ticking up, because it does update live in game. They're getting experience camp by killing a mercenary, because for most camps you get the experience from killing it. You can see that tick up and be like, oh, they're on the merc camp. So like in a lot of times people will be watching pro players, and pro players will just be like tab, and they'll instantly close the tab, right? And they're actually checking experience going up and down in a lot of cases. That's what they're looking at, and they're like, how could you possibly get information from opening and closing it that fast? That's what they're looking at. So it's one of those high-level things that once you understand the mechanics, there's this in-game resource that you can actually use to have some information about what people are doing on the map, even if you can't see them.
Yeah, so if you're like in the early stages of the game and you're wondering, hey, why are we half a level behind? Well, you can simply mouse over this and check out exactly what's going on. It might have been from kills. This is something very obvious to most players, but something that's less obvious is maybe someone somewhere in your team missed soak, and this is why you're all of a sudden half a level behind. So this is a very good and useful tool.
It should be noted that there is one additional source of experience, which is monsters. And in game terms, if you're looking at this tab, it goes under the mercenaries column, even though it is technically a little bit different, a little bit separate. And we're going to talk about it separately later on.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's various sources of experience in the game, and the first one we're going to talk about is actually going to be minions. And minions is kind of the basic of this entire game. This is how you're getting most of your experience, especially early on in the game. It's very valuable, and there's a lot of small stuff about minions and experience from them that we will discuss here shortly. Cav, minions, the floor is yours. I know there's a lot to talk about when it comes to minions and experience. Go ahead.
Minions are just sort of the bread and butter of experience income. Like in a given game, they're going to be 20, 30, 40,000 experience worth of the 80 to 90 you're going to get. They're going to be half. But in the early game, they're going to be basically 100% of it. And they're all a little, like there's some really map sort of things. So the basic idea of a minion wave is that every 30 seconds, a minion wave spawns in each lane on a given map. And the frontline minions start out being worth 70 experience. The leader minion, or the mage minion, is 62. The range minion is 60. This is different on some maps. On Tomb of the Spider Queen in particular, which is a competitive map, the waves are actually worth slightly less. Because one of the things that Blizzard found in developing the map was that the map snowballed a little too hard if you could get kills and zone people away from the wave clear. The ARAM maps, Lost Cavern, also have reduced experience. So if you're doing a brawl or something, you're like, hey, I'm not leveling up as fast as I would have thought. That's the reason why. And they scale per minute, and they don't change from when they spawn. So if a minion wave spawns at 1 minute and 2 seconds, or 1 minute and 5 seconds rather, that's the experience it's going to have until it dies. And minion experience scales every minute, and it scales in a repeating pattern. It's for an entire wave. The pattern is 11, 11, 10, 11, 14. And I want to talk about that 14. It's an interesting jump. And in order to understand why Blizzard did it that way, we have to go back to talk about total experience per level and why it works the way it does. So total experience per level, the amount of experience you need per level is actually the same between talent tiers. So from 0 to 4, you need 2,154 experience. From 5 to 7, or from 0 to 6, actually, you need 2,154 experience. From 7 to 11, you need 3,303. And then from 12, you need 4,452. Numbers are hard. And then from 17, you need 5,600 until you get to 20. And then each individual level after 20 costs progressively more to level up. The reason is really interesting because it means that the scaling of your experience versus the scaling of the minions pretty much remains constant. A minute of soak across all 3 waves will basically give you a level at all points in the game. So despite the fact that it increases, the amount of experience you need per level is increasing, the amount of minion experience you need is increasing at roughly the same rate to keep up with this curve. So you can always know if we soak this level for a minute, we're going to gain roughly a level, and it's going to lead into a lot of what I like to call map intervals that we're going to talk about at the very end, where you can always know how much experience you're going to get between objectives if you know how long the time is between objectives, assuming you're soaking all lanes. So that's a really big deal. So how do you get minion experience? Now that we've established that it's really important, how do you get minion experience? You just and there's 3 mechanics. You have to be physically in range of the minions when they die. The range is 12.75 measured in game terms, but it measures from the center point of your hero, whereas sight radius measures from the collision point, the hitbox of your hero. So there are situations you can think of it as roughly sight range. That's a rule of thumb. If that is something you're comfortable with, then that's fine. But you can actually be slightly further away than you would think. In some cases, they can be slightly out of vision. If you can see the minions, you're guaranteed to get the soak. But there's a small window where you can actually, for some heroes in particular who have bigger hitboxes, be out of range and still be getting the soak. So minion mission range is also a little bit shorter, so it means you can always get the soak out of vision. You can be in a bush, right? Then that allows you to close the gap a little bit, be safer. You can be over a wall, but you can actually be just standing far enough away, and you'll get the soak even though the minions themselves can't see you, which is a really important consideration when you're controlling vision. And again, that's when that pro thing comes in, where you're like checking to see if they're soaking in a bush because their experience level is going up. That's one way. You can be physically in range of the minion wave, and it's roughly sight range. Second way is any last hit mechanic. So if you're not physically in range, but you or an ability of yours last hits a minion, you get that experience from killing the minion. So let's say you're an Asmodan and you global wave and it kills the entire wave. You get that entire wave's worth of soak. If you are an Abathur and you have a Locust and the Locust happens to last hit a minion, you'll get the soak. There used to be I guess it's technically a strategy, but it's not as popular. Like in 2015, there was a very popular strategy with Monstrosity where Abathur could actually triple soak. He would put his body in one lane, that's the vision, and he would put his Monstrosity in another lane. And Monstrosity hit hard enough once it got stacked up that it would frequently last hit the minions. Asmo's trait, the new trait that smites a minion for its full damage every 6 seconds, I think is 7 seconds. It's a 7-second cooldown. Each of those hits is going to get that full minion of soak. So last hitting is a really relevant mechanic for a lot of heroes. Any heroes that have really long ranged abilities or some sort of funky ranged arrangement, for instance, even Chromie. Chromie's maximum range on her W, even after her nerf or rework, whatever you want to call it, is actually greater than minion soak range. So you can last hit with W from further away than other people would need to be to get that experience soak, which makes Chromie very, very safe at soaking certain kinds of lanes. Because she can literally do it safely from her tower. She doesn't have to move up as far as other heroes do. And the last one, I'm going to call it special, and it really only applies to Abathur. Abathur's hat counts as a hero. So his symbiote, if he's hatting something near a minion wave, it counts as a hero. It follows the same rule that a hero does in terms of having range. And if you're hatting a minion wave and the minion waves, even if you're not doing anything and it normally dies, you get that experience. So Abathur's the only hero that currently has that special rule. But given that it's Blizzard, you never know if it's gonna happen again. And one final note about our rule of thumb for vision: Medivh in Raven form has slightly smaller vision radius, and therefore he can actually soak outside of his vision radius. Like you can not see a minion wave directly, but be in range of the minion soak in Medivh Raven form, which is obviously really relevant for him because sometimes you don't want to show on the minimap, or you want to be in a particular place, but you still want to be in range of the wave. Even if you can't see it, you're still soaking it.
Yeah, so it's important to note that the vision is not what grants you the experience. It's just you have like this invisible range around you that does. It's just a good way to use the vision of your hero as a rule of thumb. But depending on the hero, it might not apply. Like you said, Medivh, if he has a smaller vision radius, it does not quite apply. If you're playing a hero with a big hitbox, like Diablo, then you might need to be a little bit closer than your vision range, correct, to get the experience. Yeah. And I also would like to add, are there some exception to less hits? If I remember, summons, maybe Gazlo turrets, do they get you experience if they last hit a minion?
I'm not aware of any exceptions to last hits.
No last exception.
from testing. As far as I know, it applies to everything. It would be really strange for Blizzard to make exceptions specifically for summons. We could test it real quick. I don't think that's the case. I feel like someone would have mentioned that to me at some point. And it's not in any of the docs that people have written mining game files. So now you're making me doubt myself.
Okay, now I'm just asking if there are some exceptions to last hit, but if you say
none that I'm aware
every
of.
ability counts, that's good. All right then, minions
In
then.
This is a funny story, completely unrelated to experience. Well, it's semi-related. There was a talent called Skeleton Explosion on Zool when he first came out, and because last hits counted, the skeletons would usually be in the front of the wave, and they would die, and their radius and the damage was big enough that it would kill the wave that it was pushing into, even if Zool wasn't there.
Huh, okay.
And then because it counted as a last hit for Zool, it would spawn more skeletons. And you'd have the situation where a wave could perpetually push for the rest of the game, constantly spawning more skeletons.
Oh, I remember.
If you got really lucky. That was when Zool had a 60% win rate, if anyone remembers that. And that build had a higher than 60% win rate. It had a nearly 80% win rate. And it was literally because soak was automatic. Once Zool was 16 and cleared a wave, the soak just happened, as if by magic.
Magic.
So,
all right,
yeah.
Fantastic. So minions, we covered it all, I believe.
I think that's it.
Yeah, remember, rule of thumb, use your hero's vision to know exactly the range of the at which you can soak experience. Of course, again, if you're using a bigger hero with a bigger hitbox, get a bit closer. If a smaller one, you should be fine. If you're Medivh, don't worry if you don't see the minions. And last hit, if you get the last hit in, you should get the experience. Don't worry about that. Next, Trickle experience, also known as passive. Pretty straightforward though. Cav.
So passive experience is really interesting. I'm not actually quite sure why Blizzard implemented this, and I think it might just have to do with people like not soaking early, or they wanted to maintain sort of an even keel. They wanted the games to go a little bit faster. They wanted it to be more of a brawler, less of a hero game. But basically, 35 seconds into the game, both teams receive 20 experience for doing absolutely nothing. And they continue to receive that 20 experience every second for the remainder of the game. If you're watching the game, this will actually tick up on the passive counter as 40 experience every 2 seconds, but it's actually 20 experience every second. And so in a lot of cases, like let's say that you're 19 to 20 and you're like, oh, we got to soak 20 before the objective. And you get a wave and you're like, oh, we're almost 20. But let's say you're bottom and the objective's top. You'll get 20 from Trickle experience as you're rotating up. So you really want to be aware of Trickle experience in cases where you're very close to a talent tier advantage or an even talent tier fight that you're trying to get to. And you know, okay, we're going to get that from Trickle. It's going to happen soon. And we can afford to make this rotation and take this travel time because we'll get the Trickle experience sort of on the way. So being near a talent tier can often be good enough purely because of Trickle experience.
All right. Pretty straightforward, not too much to say about the subject.
It's not very complicated,
no.
But it is interesting to know.
It is important. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes you find yourself in a situation where like you're 19.99 into the level, and you just need this a little bit to get level 20. And I mean, if you just wait it out for a few seconds, sometimes it might make a difference, and you're gonna hit the level 20 exactly when you need to. All right, next subject then, experience from structures. It's gonna be an interesting one since there were some changes recently. Go ahead.
Oh, wait. Which one are you doing?
Structures.
Oh, structures? Yeah, structures have been all over the place since the beginning of this year. Been a crazy amount of changes in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And first it was that we want the early game to be more impactful, and then it was we want to make the early game less impactful because games are snowballing too hard, even in competitive play. And there's actually, so there's outer fort towers, there's forts, there's keep towers, and there's keeps in terms of structure experience. Walls, gates, healing fountains, and core all give 0 experience. They don't give anything at all. So the towers near forts now give 250 experience, which means you get 500 for getting the entire wall, which at most points in the early game is about the same as getting an entire wave of experience. If you think about it that way, if you can only ever miss one minion wave, but you get an entire wall, you're technically even in experience, but you have a structure advantage. So maps where that's really relevant, Blackheart's Bay, Sky Temple, any map where the objective damages the buildings directly, every building matters. So if you can ever, you're playing a game, you think, oh, can we make this trade? It's worth it if you're ahead in structures, even if you're even in experience on some maps. On some maps, that's not true. On some maps, it just doesn't matter as much. So something to always be really cognizant of. Towers is another really good example. If you can ever get bottom wall and you only miss a minion wave for it, but then the bell tower is open at that point, and maybe you can take the entire bell tower later on. Bell towers / forts are worth 1,200 experience, and that's a significant jump. So if you're ever in a situation where, for instance, the Punisher on Infernal Shrines, the Immortal on BOE, those tend to get, especially the first couple, only the outer walls if they're defended correctly, especially Punishers. We've seen more and more in pro play only getting the wall. But if you've killed the wall already, you can actually usually get the fort. So if you win a fight hard enough and you have a shrine that's or a hero that's very good at the shrine, everyone else can then push, get the wall, and then the Punisher will help you get the entire fort, and that's a big jump in experience. That's 2 minion waves, depending on the game time, sometimes 3. It's a very, very, very big jump, so it's something you want to think about a lot. And then the towers near keep are worth 800 each, which means the keep wall is worth 1,600 experience. So in the late game, in addition to the fact that you can open up a win condition, if you can ever push a lane and your options are pushing a fort down or pushing a keep wall down, pushing a keep wall down is always better. It helps you open up a win condition, and it's vastly more experience, right? It's a really, really big deal. And then actual keeps are with a casual 2,050 experience, 2050. And it's worth noting, specifically on Towers of Doom, that every building is a fort until the tunnel opens, which happens right around minute 12. It's not always exactly 12 minutes. There's a script that causes it to open around objectives in a certain time frame. But it's right around the 12 minute to 12 minute 20-second mark, sometimes a little bit before. And once that happens, the bell towers all get upgraded into keeps in terms of experience. So, little known fact about Towers of Doom, the buildings actually get worth more experience in the late game, which has also been used as a comeback mechanic in a couple of pro games. People are like, oh, don't take the thing yet, we haven't upgraded yet, and then they take back their bell tower as it upgrades, and they get a little bit more experience, and helps them make comebacks.
Makes sense. All right, is it all about the structures?
That is all the building experience.
All right, so remember, guys, if you absolutely have to, always go for the keep front wall. It's going to give you the most experience.
It is worth noting that these don't scale over time. So unlike minions, buildings don't scale over time. That's your experience that you're always going to get from buildings, which means buildings are actually slightly more valuable potentially if you get a lot of them in the early game, but that's not realistic to have happen. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the late game, minions are always going to be worth quite a bit more, especially if you're getting multiple waves worth of them. But you have to kill buildings to end the game, so you're always trying to balance that tension of we want minions, we want to kill buildings, we want minions, we want to kill buildings.
Yeah. So remember that, and with the exception, of course, of Towers of Doom, where the bell towers do get the, I don't want to say scale up, but they do get the experience.
They get upgraded.
They get upgraded. Yeah, that'd be the correct one. They get upgraded to basically keep level once the shortcut opens up.
Yeah. There's an audio cue and there's a voice line and everything. The number of people who don't realize that that's what's happening when that voice line goes off is mind-boggling to me. It's really interesting.
Fantastic. Now, actually, we're gonna save this for last, I believe. So next one's gonna be Mercenaries. I'm gonna do this.
Mercenaries are really interesting because a lot of people think that Mercenaries give a significant amount of experience, and the reality is they don't. So, for instance, a standard siege camp, the entire camp gives 140 experience. And the way the only exception to this is Volskaya, and we're going to talk about Volskaya specifically a little later on. But basically, you get experience for killing the mercenaries that are neutral, but you don't get any experience for killing mercenaries that are captured. So if a siege camp is already pushing down a lane, you don't get any experience for clearing it. It's just a little bit, but it's not that much experience anyway. The base value is 140, which is roughly worth 2 minions, right? So you're getting 4 minions from doing a siege camp under optimal circumstances, but they scale quite a bit slower. They only get 4 experience upgraded per minute. So the minimum you can get is 144 if you actually do it right away, right? Which is not great. At that point, it's like worth roughly a third of a minion wave. And then the Knight plus Mage camp is 225 total for doing all 4 of the bruisers, and you get 9 experience upgraded per minute. The Golem camp is 375 with 10. So mercenary camps are not something you take for experience. So you don't ever want to take a mercenary camp just to take a mercenary camp, just for the experience. That's not going to be a valuable way to use it. You want to make sure that it's creating some sort of lane advantage. It's pushing when the enemy team isn't there. It's forcing them to rotate to deal with it so that you can get something elsewhere on the map. Mercenaries are all about timings and pressure and using their abilities. You can see even the Hellbat camp. Hellbat camp's like even a little bit worse. It's 60 experience per Hellbat. The Sapper camps are 90 each, and there's 3 of them. The Impalers, 135. Fallen Summoner camp. This is the BOE camp, the Diablo style camps. For those of you who are not familiar with the in-game names, as it be. And then you see that even Skeletal Pirate camp is worth 100. These are the little doubloon camps that there's 2 top and 2 bottom, where they drop 2 coins each. These are actually so fragile that this is almost a worthwhile amount of experience, since you get the coins anyway, and getting all 4 can actually over time lead to a significant coin lead and a significant experience lead. When Blackheart's Bay was a meta map in pro play, and it was at one point, stealth heroes were very, very popular on it, and they would constantly try to invade and steal those little coin camps, not just for the coins, but for that little extra bit of experience.
Dark times when Blackheart's Bay was part of the pro scene.
that was a thing that actually happened.
Yeah.
Now, the big exception to this is Volskaya and the turret camp and the sentinel or support camp. And this is a big exception. I want to emphasize that the way Volskaya works as a map in the professional scene is defined by the way the merc camps work. And you'll see teams getting the turret right away at 1 minute, and then they'll actually do the turret again during the mid objective. So that's how impactful. And the Sentinel, the Engineer plus Turret camp is worth 460 experience for capping it, not for killing it, but specifically for capping it. So you have to cap the camp to get the experience. This makes invades really, really threatening, particularly if you have heroes that can bully people off point. If you have knockbacks like ETC or Urel in the early game, and you have like some sort of vision mechanic, you can actually go on the camp, take it away from them, and whoever picks up the turret is going to pick up the turret, right? But you can get the experience. And at that point in the game, 460 experience scaling at 10 per minute, that's worth just about as much as a minion wave, right? We talked about in the early game, the first minion wave is worth 452. Well, this is worth 450. That's a minion wave. That's just barely short of a full minion wave. So we talked about how important minion waves are. You're getting an extra minion wave over the enemy team, and if you invade their camp and take it away from them, technically that's 2 more minion waves over the enemy team, right? Because you're getting it and they're not. With minions, it's a zero-sum game. If both teams kill all their minions, they're both getting the experience. But with the turret camp, if you get it and they don't, you're just ahead, and they can never get that experience back except by capping the camp later or getting a kill. But basically, as long as you play perfectly, you're just ahead forever in terms of experience. And that's why you see teams so aggressively going for those camps over and over again. And the Sentinel camp is worth 625 to start, again scaling at 10 per minute. So that's it. For a good portion of the game, it's actually worth more than a minion wave. And again, same thing, it's impossible to catch back up. And then you actually have the items to fight over the objective. So it's a really, really big deal. There's another exception, Hanamura, but Hanamura is not currently in the game, and I don't know if it's going to stay that way, so we're not going to talk about it. It's not relevant. But the big boss on Hanamura is a little bit special. he gave experience both for getting killed and getting the cap, so he could be worth a ton of experience. And that would have been relevant if that game didn't end, or if that map didn't end so fast all the time. That's all the mercenaries, I think. Yeah, I don't think we missed anything, May.
So there's two important things to note, or I guess maybe more even. You need to differentiate between actually killing the mercamp and capping it. Those are two separate mechanics in the game. In most cases, all you need to do in order to get the experience from the mercamp is to kill it. So if you have an aggressive invade, but you have killed the mercamp, you will get the experience, even if your opponent will capture the mercamp. So don't worry about that. But ultimately, if you are worried about experience, mercamps are not the way. They should be mainly used to gain some sort of a advantage on the map, so maybe a tempo advantage, get some push during an objective, so your opponent needs to choose, do they go for the objective, do they go to defend the camp? But as far as experience goes, they are not your priority. Fantastic. Now for an interesting one, because it's a bit different, monsters and experience.
And this is a big one, and unfortunately, all of this is going to be map specific because that's what monsters are. If you go look, it's a Blizzard term. Monsters are defined as minions or mobs that are specific to a map. And actually, a really question from chat is killing the camp mean getting the last? Yes. For the purposes of monsters and mercenaries, last hit is what defines who gets the experience, which is actually going to be really relevant in the more relevant even in the monster discussion. And there's a lot of monsters, right? Almost every map has its own individual minions. You have the guys on Infernal Shrines. Each of those is a different style of minion. You have two kinds of Temple Guardians on Sky Temple. You have the Temple Defenders and the Temple Guardians. You have the Plant Horrors and the Shamblers on Garden of Terror. You have the Horseman on Towers of Doom, who is it's a boss specific thing, but it's a little different. You have the Archangel on Braxis Holdout. It's a different kind of boss. And they all give different kinds of experience. But the two big ones that I want to mention, because they give enough experience to matter. So like the Haunted Mines Skull Golems give enough experience. I think it's 27 baseline, but it's not enough to be like, oh, it's not worth soaking a lane. Our Heroic Summons monsters now. So you have this situation where sometimes the map objective gives a significant amount of experience. The big ones are Sky Temple. The big guy on Sky Temple, the one that has the knockback and comes out of the middle of the shrine, gives 195 experience, scaling at 5 experience per minute. It's about half a minion wave in the early game. It can make a significant difference. There have been times when Li Ming was drafted on Sky Temple in professional play, partially, not entirely, but partially because her ranged allowed her to snipe the minions, even if you were giving the temple. So teams would be like, we're going to go top, we're going to get that temple, we're going to leave Li Ming mid. She's going to stand on vision, or tank's going to anchor the bush for her. And when that temple gets Guardian's Glow, she's going to globe it and get that experience. And again, minions, if both teams soak their waves, you're even. But in this case, you're not only getting that experience, you're taking it away from the enemy team, and it results in teams frequently getting both Temple Guardians worth of experience, which is a small advantage. But if you get both of them and they get neither of them, you're basically a full minion wave ahead at that point in terms of soak, because it's worth about half a minion wave.
Interesting.
Yeah, the other one, and this is, it's a little complicated. Battlefield of Eternity will always give the exact same amount of experience for the Immortal to both teams, but when they get it, changes. So you can think of it as the first Immortal spawns, it's 750 is its base, it increases by 35 per minute, but obviously it spawns at the 3-minute mark. You can't ever have a 750 version of this. I'm just going to make sure that I'm doing math correctly in my head. Yep, 855. So the first Immortal gives 855 experience to both teams. The winning team gets the 855 experience right away as soon as they cap the Immortal. As soon as they finish the race, they get 855 experience. The losing team gets a portion of the experience equal to the percentage of the amount of damage they dealt to the Immortal during the race. So if you got to do exactly 50%, you get 50% of that 855 experience. You get the rest of it when the Immortal dies. So every time you win the Immortal, there's a brief window, especially if you want to buy a lot, where you have a significant jump in experience. If you've ever had a BOE game where it's like, we're 8 to 9, and then they won the Immortal, and they got 10, and they pushed with 10, and they had a big advantage, and then we got 10 once the Immortal died, but they already had to make a fort at that point, like because we didn't want to fight into 10, we didn't want to step too far up. That's the reason. So Battlefield of Eternity, since the objective over the course of the entire thing gives equal experience to both teams, the only get ahead versus you only get ahead with kills and with structures. If both teams are soaking both lanes, you're not going to get experience specifically from the objective, and that means it's only kills or structures. So it's an interesting dynamic on Battlefield of Eternity. Battlefield of Eternity is the only 2-lane map that's really popular in pro play, and I think it really has to do with this dynamic of you can always stay even in experience. And we've seen side soaking on Battlefield of Eternity be a really prominent strategy. It's like, oh yeah, we'll defend the first Immortal. We'll defend it with like 3 people, and we'll have side soakers. There was even I think it was in 2016, there was a pocket strat on BOE that one EU team liked to run with Murky, and Murky would just constantly he would basically go to whichever lane the Mercenary their Immortal was next to, and he would soak that lane, and he would auto attack the Immortal in between waves, while his team always defended as 4. And then he would go back and put a pufferfish, and he would come back and he'd auto attack the Mercenary or the Immortal in between waves.
Interesting.
And as a result, they were always a little bit ahead in experience, and then the Immortal capped, and they were even. And then they killed the Immortal, and they were a little bit ahead in experience, and they kept that going until they got to the late game power spike that they were looking for. So again, understanding the XP economy of any given map is going to give you a lot of information about how to formulate strategies for a map. The 35 number right here is the amount of experience that goes up per minute. So at the 8-minute mark, it'd be 750 plus 8 times 35 would be the experience of the Immortal on BOE for both teams.
Okay. Interesting. So you would say that in Battlefield of Eternity, basically the amount of experience you're missing or you're going to get as the losing team correlates to the amount of shields the Immortal has.
Yeah, that would actually be a really fair way to put it.
Interesting. So maybe it's just a way for Blizzard to try and motivate players to raise the Immortal as much as they can. If you're in a dire need of experience, the more damage you do, the more experience you'll get, even if you lose once the Immortal spawns.
And the total health of the Immortal is also the amount of shield the Immortal has when it spawns. So you always want to race as much as you can safely anyway, even if you're going to lose, because it's a ranged attacker as long as it has shields, and it goes into melee as soon as its shields go away. So obviously when it's melee, it steps up, it's easier for everyone to DPS down. So it's really important for a whole variety of reasons to DPS the Immortal as much as you can.
Yeah, it's just like, various scenarios come into my mind. Like if you're about a half a level behind and, your opponent just got level 10, how can you minimize the amount of damage? Oftentimes we'd see players, either all of them try to raise to reduce the amount of shield the Immortal will have as much as possible, or they completely split off to the lanes. But it seems to me like the optimal way would be to send a person to the top, a person to the bottom, the 3 others, try and get as much experience out of the Immortal before it spawns, and kind of maximize the amount of experience you get on the map.
And we see that. We see that in pro play like quite often.
Fantastic. So now comes the big one, or at least I think it's the big one, and it's also the most interesting out of all the ways you can get experience in Heroes of the Storm, and it is kills. Frags. Cav, go.
This one is really complicated. All right.
Oh, yeah.
So there's an equation that actually governs all of the experience you're going to get from killing a hero, and it's level plus 5. So whatever level the person you're killing is, not what your level is, times 50 times the death value coefficient. For most heroes, this is 1. For Rexar, for example, it's 0.75. For Diva's Mech, it is 0.5. For Abathur, Lost Vikings, Rexar's Misha, Abathur's Ultimate Evolution, if killed, yes, Abathur's clone does give experience if it dies, is 0.25. And basically, that just reduces the effect. So that means that, like, for instance, at level 1, we would have 1 plus 6 times, or excuse me, 1 plus 5, because math is hard, times 50. And you get 300 experience, assuming you're killing a normal opponent. So it's 300 experience. Again, early game Minion Wave worth 450. Kills are not really worth very much in the early game. And it continues to go up. You can think of it as going up by roughly 50 per level, right? Because you're just adding 1 to the level plus 5. So it'd be 2 plus 5, which is 7. So you get 350, 400, 450, 500, and so on. That's pretty easy to understand. The breakpoint is right around level 5, where a Minion Wave and a kill become worth exactly or nearly exactly the same amount of experience. And again, and that's because kills scale a little bit faster than minions. So you can see levels happen faster than once a minute on average. Like a 12-minute game, you'll be getting to level 16 thereabouts, and you're getting 50 per level as opposed to the 11.4 average that a Minion Wave goes up. And so as the game goes on, kills become worth more. In the pro scene, you also talk about death timers being longer and how that matters in terms of getting advantages out of the kill. You can do things when you get a kill, like push safely, and that's actually more valuable in many ways than experience. But the big, weird thing about experience that's hard to understand and is confusing for a lot of people is the difference between the level of the killer and the killee matters a lot for the experience. And it's not a fixed level difference. Increments count. So if you're level, for instance, 9.2 and you're killed by someone who is 7.4, the real difference between your levels is actually 1.8. And you can see there's a beautiful chart here up on the screen. If the real level difference is greater than 1, you have between a 0 and 10% modifier on the amount of experience that you're getting in either direction. If it's greater than 2, it's between 10 and 30. If it's greater than 3, it's between 30 and 60. And then if it's greater than 3, or if it's less than 3.875, it's between 60 and 90. And then anything greater or equal to 3.875 goes 95% and up. It cannot go more than 100%. But this means that if a level difference is significant enough, you can actually double the experience you get from a kill. And if the level difference is basically nothing, it doesn't affect it one way or the other if you're actually exactly even on levels. So, for instance, again, going back to our example, which is helpfully on the screen, a level 9.2 hero killing a level 7.4 hero will get 440 experience. You get less experience for being further ahead. A level 7.4 hero killing a level 9.2 hero will get 700 experience.
Wow, that's big.
It's a big difference. So if you're 2 levels behind or up to 2 levels behind, you get 30% more experience per kill. This is one of the major comeback mechanics in Heroes of the Storm. The way you can think of it is that if you're 2 levels behind, a kill is worth about a third of a level. So if you're 16 to 18, you take a full 5v5 team fight, you win, you kill, let's say you kill 3 people, you're going to get 17 off of just that. And then you have all this time to do other stuff to get even further ahead. You've completely eliminated the other ace. And that's why in competitive Heroes of the Storm, being behind by 2 levels is always fine. Because you can always have one fight and you're basically completely back in the game. You'll get a level from winning a team fight, and you'll get another level from the objective that you fought over, or from just pushing with the death timers because the enemy team can't defend safely. Being 3 or more levels behind is usually really, really bad, even though you get even more experience, because you're less likely to be able to take an even talent tier fight. The only even talent tier you can fight for 3 levels behind is 16 to 19, and that's a hard fight. Most people will be like, we can get 20 first, and then fight you. But 2 levels is always acceptable in terms of level difference. If you're only 2 levels behind, you're fine. Don't panic. Play for the talent tier advantage. Play for the next objective. Just defend safely. Don't feed them any more experience. But if you're really far behind, kills are generally the only way to come back.
Yeah, and that's a very important point. I haven't played in an organized team, but I can tell you from my experience in Hero League, that oftentimes people are not aware of that. They think that if you're 3 levels behind, the correct approach would be to go and soak safely, where in most scenarios, that's not going to be possible. You're going to try and soak safely. Congrats, you're going to get your level 13, but at the same time, your opponent is going to get their level 16, and the difference is going to be roughly the same. So sometimes you just need to go for this Hail Mary move and go for the kills, because kills are the thing that's going to net you the most experience in the game at that point in time. And by the way, I did not know about this increment point. I thought only the levels themselves, but...
Nope. Every increment matters.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually haven't known this before you read the document. So that's a really good point.
And it makes a big difference, because like, let's say you're 15 to 14 and you're like, well, we should fight, and you trade 1 for 1. Trading 1 for 1 is god tier when you're behind in experience anyway, because you're getting more experience than the enemy team, and death timers are decided by level. So if you're 14 to 15, you trade 1 for 1, you got more experience than they did. Their death timer is longer than yours, so your dead guy will be back first. Like, basically, if you're ever a level down, it's always worth it to have a 1 for 1 trade, unless you're like an Alarak or something, where you're going to get like a reset on death. This is one of the reasons that Murky becomes so strong in the late game. A lot of people are like Murky, but Murky's actually very strong in the late game because his death timer stays constant. That's his big advantage, is that his death timer is always the same. It's always, a very short period of time. And Murky has enough high impact abilities that he can often trade 1 for 1. But then he's instantly back, and he only gave a quarter of a kill versus, a full kill.
Yeah.
It makes a really, really big difference. So think about this. If you're behind in experience, trading 1 for 1 is worth it. Can you catch someone in rotation? Can you dive a camp? And even if you die, if you also kill someone, it was completely worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think with that being said, we covered all the topics as far as experience goes, and here's a storm.
There's one more.
One more.
There's one more. I want to talk about something I like to call them map intervals. And basically, if you take all this data and think about it, you'll discover that per lane per minute. So if you're soaking all 3 lanes on a 3-lane map, you're going to get about a level per minute. That's basically just the way the math works out. If you get more than that, it's because you've got to kill, you got to camp, you also got to structure, something like that, which becomes very, very relevant when you're talking about objectives and objective timers, because how long happened, like how much time exists between each objective, becomes really, really relevant. So for instance, the Immortal, from the time it goes down to the time it respawns, is 1 minute and 45 seconds. Now that's a 2-lane map and not a 3-lane map. On a 2-lane map, obviously, if you're going to get a level, well, you would get 2/3 of a level, because the minion experience doesn't change. You just have 1 less wave, which means that you're going to get 2/3 of a level in a minute. So in call it 2 minutes, you would get 4/3 of a level, right? A level in a little bit. In pro play, you can go, look at the mods. Average difference is a level and a quarter to a level and a half between each objective. So let's say the objective ends and you're level 7 and the enemy team is level 9. You know for a fact that they're going to have 10 for the next objective, and you are not. There's no possible way, if you just soak, that you can get 10 for that objective, and there's no possible way you can stop them from getting 10 except by killing them. So you're in that desperate of a situation, even though you're only 2 levels behind, you actually have to force. You have to go as 5 in a 7 to 9 fight and try and look for picks and force and deny them experience. And that applies all the way up. You should always know if you're going to have a talent tier by the next objective, or if you have to find some way to force now. On Infernal Shrines, there's 3 minutes between objectives. It's a 3-lane map. Teams that soak correctly will always get 3 levels between each objective. So if you're 11 to 14, you're going to, or let's say you're 12 to 14, you're going to be 17 to 15 on the next objective. That's not good. That's not what you want. So you're going to soak 13, and then you're going to go try to force a fight 13 to 15. That should be your goal. You don't want to just give away these free talent tier advantages and be like, oh, you're going to get a talent tier and the objective for free. I didn't realize. You're going to know going forward. And let's say you're on Infernal Shrines, and you're 12 and a half, and you've won the shrine. You're at 39 out of 40. Your opponent's like 18 out of 40. They can't possibly get the shrine. Why not just soak 13? And then the next objective, you'll guarantee to be 16 as long as you soak and don't die in the interim. So you can actually control objectives. You can time out objectives to have not only an advantage for this objective, not only win this objective, but win the next objective and the objective after that, because you're going to have a talent to your advantage. And at that point, it's just about playing carefully and grinding out the rest of the game. This is occasionally why you will see pro games where one team is clearly getting stomped, go on for 18, 19 minutes, because they're just like, well, we've set up a rhythm here where we're always going to be ahead for the objective. Therefore, we're only going to fight you with the objective where we're guaranteed to win. Otherwise, we're just going to soak in AFK. And then the game eventually grinds its way out. This has come back to bite teams sometimes, who go to 20, and then they're not very happy. But Braxis is 210 between the things spawning. Tributes have a range, and then there's a fixed amount of time after the curse is over. Dragonshire has a 2-minute respawn. So go look at those map timings and think about, okay, I know this rule of thumb. 3 lanes is 1 level per minute. 2 lanes is 2/3 of a level per minute. What's the time between objectives?
That's a really good point, actually. I never thought about that until now. That's a really good point. Wow. Today I learned. Fantastic. And I think with this, we cover all the topics, all the subject of experience in Heroes of the Storm. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's more we could go into, but those are the basic things, and that's one little teaser at the end to sort of get you thinking about how experience can be manipulated to win you games.
That's fun. Actually, that's really fantastic. The last bit you just said, I'm gonna think about it for sure. Guys, if you have any questions about experience, this is the time. If you have any question, actually, any kind of question, that's also the time. So feel free. Just minions, right? Towers are not in the math.
Yeah, I'm thinking of just minions. If you can get camps, kills, or buildings in addition to that, you'll be even further ahead.
Yeah. That, of course, also includes the Trickle, by the way, but I think that's a given. There's nothing you can do about that. You don't
it does also include Trickle.
It does.
That's a good point. It actually does also include Trickle.
Yeah. How much percentage do you get on Volskaya after you step off? Not sure.
It's actually an interesting question. So you get... So capturing the point takes 6 seconds. Losing control, the point takes 6 seconds. It takes 52 seconds to go from 0 to 52, which means that you're getting an average... No, I have to do it the other way. You're getting an average... So it should give you 4%, maybe 5%. Depending on how Blizzard rounds it.
If you were... Oh wait, there's a continuation of the question. How much percent you get on Volskaya after you step off if you were controlling a point and trying to delay it?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. So, and this actually applies to many, many maps. So for instance, on Sky Temple, the last 2 shots are when you can step off the point on Sky Temple. So if the little counter, and for those of you who don't know, there's a little counter of the shots remaining and little gold bubbles underneath the temple name. If you're down to 2 shots remaining, you can step off the point. You'll get the last 2 shots even if you're not there, and you'll get the last 5 shots that are automatic for the people who are on the point at the end. So Volskaya, I think you have to step off at 92 or 93%, and then it won't finish. I can't think of any other maps that's super relevant, but I think somewhere in that range, 90-93%, you're pretty safe. If you're over that, I think it might finish.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I think this is it for tonight. No more questions. It's not on Twitch chat. There is going to be, by the way, guys, there's going to be there already is a new channel on Discord. It's called Educational Lounge. New text channels there. If you have any questions, there's a special channel there called Educational Show Questions. Just throw it there. We're going to answer it at the beginning of the next show. Otherwise, check it out. There's a how-to as well and mock draft if you want to practice your drafts. And we have another question. Is it worth taking Mercenary Camp just for the sake of experience? Cav already answered and we covered it.
Yeah, the answer is no. It is only worth it for Turret and the support camp on Volskaya specifically. Every other map, the answer is no. It should be the taking of a Merc camp should achieve a specific tactical or strategic goal, whether that's pushing a lane while the enemy's elsewhere, helping you push a lane, denying it to the enemy team so that they can't do that same thing to you, but definitely not.
There's going to be, of course, some edge cases, I imagine, from time to time. One game in 100 or something where you really want to maximize the amount of experience you get. You cover all 3 lanes, and you still want to capture the for the experience. Go for it for sure, as long as you don't miss experience in other places. This is fine, but otherwise, generally speaking, not worth it. Better use it for some tempo gain on the map or something like this. Oh, we have actually another question, I think. I wasn't from the start, but did you explain if one team want to get kills instead of soaking a lane, and if it is profitable, it's through whole game or on some levels?
I mean, it's a very map dependent question, and how big is the difference? If you're ever more than 3 levels behind, we did talk about this a little bit. If you're 3 or more levels behind, you have to get kills to come back. That's just the reality of the situation. You're never going to come back in a game where you're 3 levels behind. In 2 levels behind, you can afford to soak and play for like even talent tiers. You can play for a 13 to 15 fight, a 16 to 18 fight, even a 7 to 9 fight is something that can realistically happen, because you get that comeback experience from trading 1-for-1 or even getting a kill just from because you're behind in experience. But as a rule of thumb, the reason you get behind is not soaking in the first place. So if you didn't soak, you shouldn't soak because you're already so far behind. But if you were soaking, you're only ever going to be 2 levels behind. So you should soak and stay only that deficit behind. So it's kind of a funny dynamic, and you'll see it in quick match or even here all the time, where you're like, people are feeding, they're not soaking, you're 3 levels behind, and suddenly you win a team fight and you like get a 5-man wipe and everything's hunky-dory. You're back even in experience and it's fine. So soaking is really, really important. It just gets to a point where it's not enough to win if you're so far behind because you're not soaking, which is usually what the case ends up being.
Yeah.
This is why people don't brawl in pro play. They go to their lanes.
That is true. Well, Cav, thank you very much for joining me here this evening. It took us exactly an hour, actually. I'm glad. Although it probably could have lasted even longer, I'm sure. I
mean, I can talk about experience for a while. Like people talk about my Hanamura strategy, and really, guys, my Hanamura strategy was basically just I looked at the XP economy of the map, and I was like, you know what? You can 5-man push fast enough that you're going to get the same amount of experience pushing, but you'll get structures, and then you can get ahead in experience just by getting the camps, because the camps give so much experience and it completely evens it out. But you're ahead in structures, and then if you kill the keep with that 10 advantage from being ahead in experience because you grabbed the camps, then there's a constant threat from ending the game, and you have opened up an early game win condition, which is not possible on most maps.
I actually remember that, and I actually managed to make it happen one time in Hero League, back when it was still there, and we ran like a Zarya, Sylvanas comp or something like that. I'm pretty sure I remember the Zarya there, and I think there was also Sylvanas, and we just 5-man pushed a single lane. We took the keep in like a few minutes, like before level 7 even, I think, and it was pretty stumpy. Yeah.
Understanding the XP economy of a map will give you insight into how to play the map for advantage and how to play the map for wins.
Yeah. Fantastic. Guys, viewers, I hope you enjoyed this. This was the first episode ever of this educational lounge. I think this is how we're going to call this. There were some interesting names like How to Grief and How to Play Clown Heroes and stuff like this. It's some interesting names for sure, but I think we're gonna stick with something very vanilla. If you enjoyed it, if you have, let's start with this. If you have any feedback, feel free to direct message me on Discord. I'm open to any kind of suggestions. If you have any questions regarding the show and what we talked about tonight about experience, feel free to also leave the question in the appropriate channel. As I mentioned, we opened up a new channel on Discord. It's called Educational Lounge. You're gonna see there a special chat channel, so feel free to ask there. Otherwise, if you enjoy educational stuff, make sure you follow CavalierGuest on his Twitter, and most importantly on his Twitch channel. He produces several times a week actually educational stuff, between either various guides to random questions, analyzing pro play. I know I'm a fan. I'm watching as many of them as I humanly can. Cav, thank you so much for joining me here. It was a pleasure, and I hope I'm going to see you next week. I think we're going to do this once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Going to see how much content we can actually shop, but I hope you're going to join me next time.
in terms of the basics, there's a lot to go over.
Oh, yeah.
So, and especially like we could talk about rotations for our next topic. We could talk about there's so many things that people need to know, especially in league play when you're playing with 5 people on comms, same or same teams consistently. There's all sorts of things, and of course that's the Heroes Lounge experience, right? That's the appeal of the league in the first place.
Yeah. Very, very true. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about next week, guys. Don't worry about that. We'll have a more known schedule in the future, so you won't need to guess what we're going to talk about next week. But still, I hope you enjoyed the content we provided you this evening. If you enjoyed it, make sure you follow the channel if you're new, and if you're not, make sure to leave some kind of comment in our educational channels on Discord, and make sure to check CavalierGuest and his various platform he's in Discord, Twitch, and Twitter. Guys, have a good night, and see you next time.
Good night, everyone.